Togo, small in size but immense in spirit, is a sliver of West Africa stretched between Ghana and Benin, where the Atlantic breeze meets the echo of ancient kingdoms. From the bustling markets of Lomé to the sacred forests of Kapalime, this narrow strip of land carries a history of resilience, resistance, and rebirth. For decades, Togo was seen as quiet, a place of silent endurance under the weight of dynastic rule. But beneath the surface, the heart of a people had been beating, waiting, and when it finally thundered, the world turned its eyes to Togo, not for its borders, but for its bravery. Togo is known for its vibrant cultural heritage, rich traditional kingdoms, and diverse ethnic groups like the Ewe and Kabylie. The country is also recognized for its lively markets, voodoo traditions, and scenic beauty, from the palm-fringed beaches of Lomé to the lush hills of Kapalime. Togo has long been noted for its phosphate exports and agricultural products like coffee, cocoa, and cotton. Politically, it's known for enduring decades of authoritarian rule under the Gnassingbé dynasty, sparking waves of resistance and calls for democratic change. In the early hours of a seemingly ordinary day in Togo, a whisper ignited a revolution. At 2:17 a.m., an audio clip began circulating in encrypted telegram groups and private WhatsApp threads. The voice, grainy but recognizable, allegedly belonged to one of President Faure Gnassingbe's own advisors. In the recording, he spoke nervously about secret offshore accounts, backdoor weapons deals, and the transfer of large sums to a European holding firm. But it was one line that would ignite the nation. He's preparing to leave with the money, not the people. By dawn, that sentence had been replayed over 1 million times. Students were the first to move. University campuses across Lomé erupted. By 7 a.m., students had blocked major roads, chanting for change and waving cardboard signs with one chilling message: 72 hours. The number wasn't random. Sources close to the opposition said it was the final deadline, 72 hours for Faure Gnassingbé to resign peacefully, or the people would no longer recognize his authority. Mechanics rolled their toolboxes into the streets. Shopkeepers chained up their stores and joined in. Women banged pots from balconies. Taxi drivers refused fares to government officials. And in the heart of the capital, a sea of citizens began forming, arms raised, flags waving, shouting in unison: "Faure must fall." For the first time in decades, Togo's air smelled different. It wasn't just heat or dust or tear gas, it was defiance. By midday, the crowd stretched for miles. No opposition leader had called them. No political party had mobilized them. This wasn't a protest. This was an eruption. Deep inside the heavily guarded presidential residence, a man who had ruled since 2005 stared out his window at a rising tide he could no longer control. The clock had started ticking, 72 hours. By sunrise, the capital no longer belonged to the regime. It belonged to the people. Lomé was pulsing. From every corner, crowds gathered with a force that felt unstoppable. Not hired protesters, not political fanatics. These were mothers, sons, soldiers in plain clothes, elders with cracked voices, children on their parents' shoulders, united by one demand: 72 hours. The chant was everywhere, painted across walls, written on scraps of wood, blasted from megaphones atop taxis. It echoed down alleyways, through markets, across the courtyard of the National Assembly. It was more than a countdown. It was a final warning. The streets became stages of defiance. At Place de l'Indépendance, thousands surrounded the fountain, waving torn national flags like battle standards. Drummers pounded rhythms of rebellion. A young woman stood on top of a flipped garbage bin and shouted, "We're not afraid anymore. Let them send tanks. We have nothing left to lose." The crowd roared in response. Government forces lined the avenues, helmets on, shields up, but they didn't move. Not yet. Some looked uncertain. A few even lowered their heads as civilians passed. The line between order and revolt was thinning by the hour. In the neighborhoods of Bay and Akodewa, barricades were being built. Not for violence, for protection. Protesters organized food stations. Medics began handing out saline and gauze. Artists painted massive banners that read, "Faure's time is up." Inside the presidential media office, a press release was drafted but never published. Officials debated behind closed doors. Should Faure speak, apologize, threaten? The fear wasn't the size of the crowd. It was the fact that no one knew who was leading it. There were no microphones, no political party logos, no formal demands, just a nation that had finally found its voice, and it was screaming. The presidential compound loomed quiet over Lomé, too quiet. For nearly 2 decades, Faure Gnassingbé had ruled Togo with a firm grip and a soft face, always calculated, always calm. In times of unrest, he would appear on national TV, his voice polished, rehearsed. But this time there was nothing, no statement, no denial, no video, just silence. Inside the compound, the walls were tense. Advisors whispered. Military commanders stood stiff in the hallways, eyes shifting. Gnassingbé was there, but he wasn't speaking. Some say he paced. Others say he sat in the war room, watching live drone feeds of the protests swelling in the streets. Still, the orders came quietly. Armored vehicles rolled into Lomé before dawn, not in formation, not aggressive. They just parked silently. At key intersections, near the national broadcaster, near the Ministry of Defense, near the airport, soldiers stood like statues, their presence heavy, their expressions blank. But they didn't engage. It was a waiting game, and the people knew it. In the face of this silence, the uprising only grew louder. Chants now filled the air day and night. One song swept through the crowds like wildfire, sung in Ewe and French. 72 heures, 72 hours, or we decide. Graffiti appeared on the statues of past dictators, crossed-out portraits, red handprints on ministry walls. The silence from Faure wasn't calming the people. It was enraging them. They saw it as weakness, as guilt, as confirmation that everything in the leaked audio was true. Somewhere deep in the city, inside a modest apartment, a former political prisoner recorded a short video, face half in shadow. He looked straight into the lens and said, "If he won't speak to us, then he no longer leads us." It went viral in under an hour. The power of the state was still intact on paper, but in the minds of the people, something had shifted. And the silence from the top, it was starting to sound like the end. By the 24th hour, Lomé was unrecognizable. The streets were no longer just protest zones. They were command centers of the people. Makeshift barricades guarded intersections. Protest leaders used walkie-talkies and megaphones to coordinate movements. Motorbikes zipped through narrow alleys delivering supplies. In the heart of the capital, a human wave surged toward government buildings, not with weapons, but with unity. And the fire was no longer confined to Lomé. In Sokodé, hundreds blocked the main highway with burning tires and tree trunks. In Kapalime, market women shut down the entire town center, chanting, "No more dynasties." Even in Kara Faure's birthplace and former stronghold, the mood shifted. There were no cheers for the regime, only silence and scattered whispers of rebellion. What made this different wasn't the numbers, it was the organization. People brought water tanks, medkits, and food. They took shifts, they cleaned their protest zones. Even grandmothers walked side by side with young men in construction helmets. It was no longer just a protest, it was an occupation. Meanwhile, online, the resistance exploded. Togolese in the diaspora posted messages of support from Paris, Toronto, and New York. Hashtags like "Do 4 must go" and "Don't 72 heures" pour partir trended globally. Celebrities and influencers across West Africa began to speak out. a famous Nigerian activist tweeted, "Togo's people are doing what many only dream of. They found their voice. Now they need the world to listen."